You know. Yeah.
Do
I don't know. Is it happening?
I'm like, we're all frozen.
I think they're slowly coming in now.
Okay. Oh, I can see the numbers going up. This is
Oh,
thrilling.
I can see it coming. Cool. This is exciting. Oh my goodness.
I know. I feel like we should like be drum rolling or something. Yeah.
Well, sometimes there's music going on, but you know, we're missing our DJ. I know it's very weird. Zoom is very weird. But you all look so great and fresh, and I hope you're all well in your Zoom, in your quarantines.
I know, right?
Strange quarantine.
I guess I'll start just so we can get the conversation started. So hi everyone, welcome. Thank you for attending this virtual event organized by Word Up Community Bookshop. If you don't know, we're a bookshop and art space run by local residents, many of whom are volunteers. When we're not experiencing a pandemic, we can be found at 2113 Amsterdam Avenue at the corner of 165th Street in Washington Heights. I'm in Washington Heights right now, so it's a little loud. We normally host daily events for all ages, youth, and new folks. And we hope you will visit us when we're finally open again, which we don't know when that will be. We're also partnered with the census to remind our community of how important it is to get counted. Billions of dollars are at stake for New York, money that goes to schools, infrastructure, housing, and healthcare, all these things that are super important right now during this pandemic. We encourage everyone here to take their census at my2020census.gov and to check in with loved ones to make sure they also filled out their census in their preferred language. Because we don't know when we will be open again, we started a GoFundMe campaign to maintain our space and to meet our obligations. And also money from the GoFundMe is also helping support all the books that we're sending out to kids through our book club right now. So definitely, if you have a chance, check that out and share it with your network. And thanks for coming. I'm going to hand it over to Angie, I think, that's going to say a few words about the book club.
Hi, I'm Angie Cruz, and I co-curated this with everyone at Word Up. I'm so excited to be here. And thank you all for attending. And I am passing it now to Angela Velez.
All right. So yes, another Angela and Angie. Thank you everyone for coming to today's talk. I am so excited to talk to these incredible authors and ask them questions, but I'm even more looking forward to all of the book club members and seeing the questions that they have. So definitely use that chat function and send these authors some questions. I think that would be really cool. But to get started, maybe we can, I guess the authors can wave and when I say, so we have Patron Saints of Nothing author, Randy Ribay. And
hi everyone.
And we have to duo, Maika Moulite and Maritza Moulite here, authors of Dear Love. And then last but not least, Matt Mendez, the author of Barely Missing Everything.
Hello.
All right, so to get things started, I thought I would start with you, Matt, in talking about, there are 3 stories in here, 3 voices, JD, Juan, and Fabi. And so I was curious, did you always have these 3 voices in mind? And whose voice was easier or harder to write? Why do you think that is?
They were all really hard to write, and I don't know why I constantly do that when I write stories. I just have these competing character voices that always intrude themselves in the story. So I don't start when I write a novel to want to have multiple point of view characters, but when I start writing a story, I'll have a side character that just kind of pushes their way into the story, and not before long they have their own point of view. And in Barely Missing Everything, the character that was the most fun to write for me was Fabi. And for a YA story, she's an adult character with a point of view in a YA story, which is really unusual for YA books. And for me, what made her the most fun to write is I'm a father. I got 2 young daughters, and her perspective, looking at her son, watching him grow up, and thinking about her childhood and her relationship with her parents and how it affects her relationship with her son, to me was just like rich territory to write about. And it had me think about my relationship with my parents, with my father, and then how that relationship affects how I raise my kids. So to me, it was just really, really rich territory for me to mine and write and think about.
Was it fun for, like, your characters are keeping secrets from each other, especially from the mother and son perspective? So what was that like to go back and forth and who knows what?
That was maddening. I had to keep really good notes to make sure when I was writing the story that I wasn't, keeping, or I wasn't confusing which character was keeping secrets from who. And it was difficult. I had to write everything down and have an intricate system of note cards and timeline. So it was a little tricky to do, but I had a lot of fun doing it. And you get really into writing one character, and then having to switch gears was a little difficult. So when I was writing the story, I would only write the chapters and then revise the chapters really broken up. So I would write all of JD's story together and then revise only the JD parts. And then I would do the same for Fabi and the same for Juan, which makes the writing process, at least for me, really, really long. So I probably won't end up being a prolific writer. It takes me a long time to write because of the process to get each character voice down exactly how I want it. It's a long, thorough process.
Yeah, I can imagine. And like keeping those note cards straight and all that research and everything as well.
It's crazy. There's notes everywhere. It's a disaster.
Cool. So now, Randy, so I was reading how you had talked about how poetry has influenced your work. And there's a poem at the beginning of your book. So can you talk to me a little bit about the poetry that you were reading while you wrote this book and how it influenced the story?
Yeah, good question. I do love poetry. And it was kind of my entry point into writing.
Mm-hmm.
When I first kind of decided I wanted to start writing, a friend of mine and I decided that we would like create a blog and we would post a poem a day for a year, just to kind of get in the habit of just writing a lot and not worrying too much about like whether something's good or not. And so that was kind of like the first entry point in terms of just like writing regularly. And we did keep that up for a year. And there are a few other people that like joined us along the way and actually like still contribute to that blog. So that's been pretty cool. But for me, I got into poetry, when I was in college more so. And so I was reading kind of all over the place, like Audre Lorde, Jean Toomer, Sandro Cisneros, as well as some Filipino-American poets like Patrick Rosal, who's the one who's quoted in the beginning of the book. And that very much, I think, is like a part of how I write. I don't remember like what I was reading when I was writing this, because I do try to like keep reading poetry. I heard Rebecca Solnit speak once and talk about how poetry is like a good reminder of what language can do. And so I feel like it's kind of helpful for that. And so I think it really influences the way that I write, because I really listen to the sound of the words as I'm writing. And like I'll revise until it sounds right. And I can't explain to you why it sounds right or anything. I'm just like, yeah, just like the rhythm of that paragraph or the rhythm of that sentence, like that it fits now, right now. Like change words here and there, just like, when you're working on a poem, just like tinkering at the individual level. And the poem that I pull from with Patrick Rosal, he was I think the first living Filipino-American writer that I had read in my life. And so pulling from that poem, which is kind of about his father, who was a priest and then kind of left the priesthood to marry his mom, was kind of an homage to somebody who kind of spoke to me for the first time, because I really connected with his poems. It's from a longer collection called Up Rock Headsman Scramble and Dive. He's out of North Jersey, I think sometimes in Brooklyn, sometimes in Philly, and yeah, so it's important to me to like always, I like to use that space at the beginning of the book to kind of like, acknowledge kind of those who came before me or those who kind of contributed to to what I think is my writing style. I don't know if that answered your question at all, but
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, you know, you're working on these sentences, getting them to sound just the right combination. So are you talking out loud at your computer? Are you reading them in your head? What's your process there like?
a combination of both. I think like when I read, I've talked about this with my wife a lot because she reads like 5 times faster than I do. Like she doesn't hear the words in her head when she reads. And I do, and I think maybe that's like why. And so when I write, it's a combination of kind of hearing it, and then every now and then I'll stop and like say something out loud to get a feel for the rhythm. But yeah, it's very like this is really hard to explain, but like language almost has like a tangible feeling to me, and like different writing styles like feel tangibly different. Like some will feel like really silky, right, and like some will feel like really really like disjointed, but like in a good way sometimes. If that that sounds bad, but sometimes I feel like that's intentional and like purposeful discordance. And so when I'm reading out loud, it kind of helps me get a sense of that feeling and whether it feels like it's landing correctly.
And Maritza and Maika, I see you guys are nodding. Is that similar for you?
Yes, I was saying, like, should we hop in right now? Like, we're playing hopscotch or double dutch. But yes, I completely agree with that. There are definitely times when I'm reading that I have to read it out loud, and we don't necessarily write poetry in the stories that we write, but it helps me to get a feel for the cadence, because let's say there's a dramatic scene that's happening. We want it to sound choppy, quick. Like you can tell that there's movement. The sentences are short, so you can see that the story is moving along quickly. And then when the person is really getting into like their emotions and it's that internal dialogue, we will kind of stretch the sentence out a little bit and get into maybe the color of an emotion that they're feeling. You know, we just kind of give it a little bit of, I guess, more description in that point. But I hear you. There are definitely times when we're writing and I will want to read it out loud. And Marissa's like, Maika, we have to finish writing. Like, we can't just stop to read it out loud. And I'm like, no, I want to hear how it sounds. So.
Yeah, and I think also like thinking beyond like how do we tell story in like tone and word choice, you guys are using documents and text messages and news articles in your book. So I was curious, like, how do you decide what gets told in a text or an email and what gets told in Elaine's diary or in a conversation?
Yeah. I kind of forced me to write this book as the epistolary novel. Yeah. I was against it at first. I was like, epistolary? Why would we do that? But it lends itself to be a really fun opportunity to kind of figure out what you're going to use where, like what you were saying. So in terms of Elaine really getting deep into her feelings and revealing something that she hasn't shared to anyone out loud, like that's going to be in the diary, which makes sense. But then other times it was an opportunity to like have a funny moment come from a different perspective. Like we have a police report in the story and an officer is explaining what happened and they're being very straightforward about it. But then because you already know the characters, we think it's a funny moment. But I think it also depends on who or like the context of what's being told. Like we can definitely see people like a bunch of classmates talking trash about another classmate in a text chain while they're supposed to be doing classwork. So things like that. It was a mixture of like really obvious choices that we felt like we needed to do, and then other moments to be able to play around them. Yeah, it kind of talks to how in different situations you code switch. So depending on if you're speaking with your friends or your parents or a teacher, and Elaine has these different moments throughout the story where she's speaking to different people, and you can tell her the way that she is getting her message across will shift depending on who she's speaking with. But then there are times where she forgets herself and she'll be a little extra sassy with her mom, and then her mom will be like, don't forget who you're talking to. So it's that balance of being able to use the different forms of whether it's text messages, emails, diary entries, research that she pulled up from, what do you call those online research things, like a JSTOR or like online, like an online database, yeah, whatever that is. So it gives you a different perspective of how she's navigating and interacting with the people as well.
And I think this is a follow-up question for you, but also for everyone. So if you were kind of following a similar storytelling mechanism, but about your own life, what documents would reveal your personality? I often think my grocery receipts reveal my my mood at the moment. So I'll just go ahead.
That's amazing. That's a great question. I remember reading something on Twitter of someone saying, like, if you look at my phone notes, there are going to be some notes of like, life is meaningless. I have nothing to live for. But then also a list of things you have to get at the store. And I think you don't want to see my phone notes. Yeah. So, yeah. Okay. I'm not saying it because she just said it, but so in quarantine, I've been staying with my family. So all of us are in one house, and I left my physical journal at home. So if you got my physical journal, you would see, into my head, but I've been putting everything in my phone notes, but then I'll put those tweets that I'm like, you can't tweet this girl. So I'll just write it to myself and keep it there. So if you read that, you would really get some insight into all the things that I want to say, but I think are better left unsaid.
Got it. Matt, what about you?
I do a lot of writing on my phone. I have Scrivener on my phone, and I have notes that I make random suggestions to myself for story ideas or notes or pieces of dialogue. And then sometimes I abandon those and I don't go back to them. So there's just pieces of dialogue that are on notes or in open documents and Scrivener on my phone, and I'll go back and look at them and I'll be like, what am I saying to myself here? Or what does this dialogue say? So if it looks like this crazy person's conversation that's completely devoid of context, because I left myself like zero clues as to what it's supposed to be or where it's supposed to go. If you were to read that, you would just think I'm this lunatic person that's just having random dialogue with myself or with anyone. It's hard. It's insane.
Yeah. Randy, what about you?
Maybe something similar. So I've always wanted to be like a notebook person, but I am not, because I lose them or I just like leave them behind or something. But I actually have been using Google Keep to kind of keep track of just like random thoughts and ideas and notes. And so you'd probably see some interesting stuff if you looked at my Google Keep. Sometimes I'll like wake up from a dream and I'll just like note something down, be like, maybe that's interesting. And then I'll go back at it later. Like I literally have a note in there that just says hamster race. And I have another one that just says invisible bees. And like, I don't remember when I wrote these, but it's just like at some point I just thought, hey, this was a great idea.
I send myself emails. I'm sorry. I was just going to say that I send myself emails too, and I'll just like get random emails from myself, and it says at like 3:00 in the morning, give up sugar. And I don't give up sugar. But don't discredit those random dream things, because that's how we actually got the title for Dear Haiti Love Lane. So our editor, her assistant at the time, we were like trying to think of a title. We're terrible with titles, and we couldn't figure one out. And apparently, her name is Gabby. Gabby, shout out to her. She went to sleep, had a dream, emailed herself, and she woke up, and the subject only said Dear Haiti Love Lane, and it said nothing else. And I was like, this is a perfect title, and it worked out. So the hamster race might transition into something else.
I'm looking forward to hamster race, Randy.
I mean, the story writes itself, really.
Okay, so Randy, you're up next. So what I really liked about reading the story is how much of it kind of depends on Jay learning how to talk to his family, whether it's like standing up to his uncle or getting his dad to open up to him. And so I was curious, like, is this writing from personal experience? How did you come up with this kind of family dynamic that you set this story in?
So it definitely comes from personal experience. I think there's also a cultural piece to it, at least having talked to other Filipino Americans and Filipinos, that, there's a lot of reluctance or hesitance to talk about things that can be perceived as shameful, right, or negative. And so, in both, I think, my family and in a lot of Filipino families, there's a tendency to just ignore or just not talk about what's difficult instead of confronting it. And something I think about more and more as I get older, and as I go to therapy more often, right, is how unhealthy that is. And you can, at the individual level, at the familial level, at the societal level, right, when these difficult things or painful things in the past are never addressed, they just fester, right, just like a wound, and they get worse and worse until they either blow up or like cause some other kind of pain or sorrow. And so that's something that I wanted to explore in the story, in terms of just, the story. Something I get like hit on a lot is like, there's no plot. And I'm like, yeah, well it's like more emotional, right? Because like in terms of what's happening in the story, is just like he's just kind of like learning more about his cousin that like his family wouldn't tell him. And so it's kind of this method of, I guess, like uncovering the history, the personal history, the family history, in a way that allows it to be confronted, right? One of my favorite quotes of all time comes from James Baldwin, who has like a million quotes that are like my favorite of all time. But, he has one that's like, not everything can be changed, but nothing can be changed unless it's faced. Or he probably said it more eloquently than that, but that's the kind of idea behind it. And I think so many problems are just caused by that lack of communication. And so many of those problems can be solved, or, at least made slightly better, if we would just open up and talk about these things.
Yeah, I think also like now with Matt and thinking about that, and like how do you open up and how do you cross kind of these boundaries, especially like language boundaries. And I was reading that you had recently said having your novel translated in Spanish was a dream come true. And so can you talk a little bit about why that is and how the reception has been from Spanish readers?
It's only been a few months since the translation came out. It came out in March. So that the reception's still kind of coming in, and with COVID kind of locking everybody down, the reception's kind of been a little muted. I haven't been able to go out and actually talk to kids, which has been kind of sad. But I'm hoping when school in August, when it gets into classrooms, that I'll get to hear more from bilingual kids and kids who speak Spanish. But for me, I just know that half my family can't read the book, which is, kind of a disappointment. It's a huge disappointment to know that it's not going to reach, aunts and uncles and cousins that just aren't, that language barrier is going to be there. And I can talk to them about the book, but I know that they're proud, and they know that their primo has a book that's out, but that they can't fully enjoy the experience of the book because language is a barrier. So to have that book out there for them and have that be a part of their lives is just such a joyful thing for me.
Yeah.
And I know that, and to have it reach, other people who are in the same situation, to have their family members be able to have that book and have that orgullo that comes with reading, about their experience, is just super important to me.
Yeah, is that the same? I know your books have been translated also, I think. Has that been the same kind of feeling for you guys, Randy or Maritza and Maika?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Oh yeah, sorry. I know. So have any of you had your books translated, and has that kind of been a similar feeling?
Oh, so Dear Haiti, Love Elaine is only in English right now, but something that we have been trying to do is like reading it to our grandmother who speaks Creole, because we're Haitian from Haiti. So trying to translate it as you're reading it in English to Creole is an astronomical feat. It is. My tongue is heavy, and it's not always a smooth process, but it was that desire to share this story that, shines such a spotlight on our culture. And it's interesting because Elaine has that duality of being both Haitian and Haitian American, and trying to navigate, learning Creole, but it's not, I wouldn't say as native as a language to her as English is. So when we were writing it out, when she speaks in Creole and in other languages, we italicized it just to show that there's a level of distance that she has from the language. But when we have certain words that when the character is speaking, if the person is Haitian, we didn't italicize it, or we changed the way that the word works. So for instance, voodoo
if somebody who is not Haitian says it, they say voodoo, voodoo. But if the person is Haitian, they say vaudou, which is how you pronounce it in Creole. So it's just like these slight ways that we're able to give a nod throughout the story, but hopefully one day it will get translated. So if we have anybody out there.
Yeah, and with Patron Saints of Nothing, it's only in English. Thanks to colonialism, English is one of the national languages of the Philippines, and the other one being Tagalog, or commonly known as Filipino. So it gets really complicated because even Tagalog or Filipino is not, there's over like 170 languages or so, depending on how you count them in the Philippines. And so even if you were to translate it into, say, Tagalog, that's not actually, I have a family that speaks that, but that's not actually like the first language from my family. And so it's a really strange thing. And there's also like classism kind of tied up in, who can speak English well, who is taught it more. And if, it's kind of a shame because I wish it would get translated, but it's not likely to, also for just economic reasons. I don't think publishers would think it's worth the expense if English is one of the national languages already.
Yeah. So now we have a question from one of our book club members who wants to know, how is it, this is from Gabriela, how is it for you as a grown-up to write a teenage experience, a teenage perspective?
All right, we're on mute. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go, jump in. Or we can take
Okay. No, I would say that part of it is that I don't see myself as a grown-up in my head based on what I perceived a grown-up to be when I was younger.
Yeah.
So I feel like I'm the same, but whatever. But I think that's part of it. And then also when you're writing, especially young adult or middle grade or any books for children, like your childhood is such an important part of your life. It sets the stage for everything that comes after. It's what, when you're a teenager, it's often the first time that you get to experience things, develop your own opinions on things, maybe for the first time kind of branch away from beliefs that your parents or the community around you have. So that really stays with you because it's the first time that you are becoming more of yourself. That's all we're doing, right? So I think it's easy to tap into that feeling, even if, technology might change and nobody talks about MySpace anymore or whatever, but those emotions are what matter. Those emotions are timeless.
Yeah, but I agree with everything Maritza said. Part of it too is, like, I don't know if this happens to anybody else, but you end up unpacking things or assigning certain traits that you wish that you had when you were younger. Because for Elaine, she's very opinionated. She's not afraid to express herself, and she will very much stand up for what she believes in. But I know that when I was her age, I did not always feel that comfortable. So I would literally, I have sweaty palms if I had to make a presentation, like all of the anxiety that I feel or felt as a child, and sometimes even as an adult. So you're able to unpack that as you're writing and think, what would it have been like if I did speak up? Or what would I do now as an adult? And as we're writing these different things, there are certain things that you learn as time progresses. You kind of learn more about yourself and about what you value. So as a writer, if you have your own agenda, really, it's an opportunity to get people to think of things in a way that they might not have before. So it's a fun endeavor for us to be able to write for young people. You guys keep us young.
Matt, what about for you?
I think there's such a great vulnerability that you get to explore when you write for young people that you don't really have when you write for adults. So when you're writing for an adult audience, there's like a pretense, I think, that comes with writing for adults. They're looking for, I don't want to say like literary snobbery, but when you're writing for a younger audience, there's like a certain nakedness in the writing that you can explore that I think the audience appreciates much more than an adult audience. So you get to talk about love and fear and really get to put your heart into a story in a way that you don't have to be defending yourself as a writer, because the audience is willing to embrace those things, because those are things that they're dealing with in their everyday life. And that you don't have to have like this kind of snobbery pretense that a lot of adult fiction kind of demands that you have, because they're afraid of the feelings they had when they were young people.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, it's a much more pure endeavor, I think, when you're writing for a younger audience, and I just enjoy doing that.
Yeah. And Randy, for you?
I agree with all of the above.
Okay, so Matt, I was reading in your bio that you have worked with airplanes your whole life. So I was curious, what does that mean? And also, like, how did you go from working with airplanes to becoming a writer? Or were you a writer all along?
I was not. So I didn't grow up in a family that read books at all. So it wasn't until I joined the Air Force right out of high school at 18, and I wanted to be a filmmaker.
Mm-hmm.
So I did 4 years of active duty, got out, moved to Arizona, and started going to college while working as a full-time aircraft mechanic with the National Guard, which I still do because I still mess with airplanes. But I went to school full-time, and while I was going to film school, I took a creative writing class to kind of help with screenwriting. And then I just started falling in love with books. I discovered Sandra Cisneros in my mid-20s. And then I just kind of took off after that. I started finding writers of color who looked like me and who looked, different. I found African-American writers, Asian-American writers, Native American writers, and this whole world just kind of blossomed up for me. And I'm disappointed that I didn't find that in high school and in middle school. So I came to it late. And that's another reason why I want to write for young people, so they can have that experience that I didn't have. But then I just started writing, and I ended up getting an MFA in creative writing while still working full time. And I just kind of dual hat it now.
Cool. Is there any, maybe it's meditative. Are you thinking about stories while you're working on planes, or is it totally one hat on, one hat off?
It's basically one hat on, one hat off type
Yeah.
thing. They're super different.
You should probably be paying pretty close attention when you're working on an airplane.
Yeah, I'm in management now. I've been there for so long, so it's mostly just staring at a computer and staying awake during meetings, trying to. But I did pay attention when I was working on them.
Okay. Randy or Maika and Maritza, is that that journey of becoming a writer? Is that something you've kind of always saw yourself as, or is that something that you've kind of been working towards? What has that been like for you?
It's so funny because I don't know where we are on Randy's screen, so he goes, yeah.
I don't either, so I just kind of
You are correct.
gestured somewhere.
So I think I would have identified myself as more of a lifelong reader. We spent so much time in the library growing up because our parents were mean and wouldn't let us watch TV on the weekdays. So we would go to the library every weekend and then just check out across the ring. and would just check out a zillion books and get through them during the week. And in those moments, I thought, it would be fun to write, but I didn't really write fiction. But there were moments growing up when I felt the need to write, and I wouldn't even write in a journal consistently or anything, but if something dramatic happened at school, I would come home and then instead of writing, Darren asked me for a pencil today, I would have said, because I have 3 sisters who are super nosy, I would have been D-G, D-A, and then coming back a week later, I would not know what the letters stood for. But I just felt that need to put something out on paper. So and it wasn't until I guess undergrad when I felt you know what, trying to publish a book would be a really cool thing to do, and then it worked out. Yeah.
I used to write all the time. I used to write poems when I was younger. And now that I look back at them, I'm they were not good. They were not good. But I always had that desire to get my thoughts out onto paper because my mind is always moving a mile a minute, thinking of the next thing. And, you know, my therapist, because Randy mentioned therapy, shout out to therapy, says that sometimes I can be like an octopus because I want to do so many things at the same time. So writing has always been my way of streamlining that and being able to prioritize. So writing has always been something that I was drawn to. And because our parents were strict patient parents who didn't let us go anywhere except for school, home, and church, we had to get our entertainment from somewhere, and we read a ton of books, which helped us to be able to write them one day.
Oh, sorry, Randy, were you going to jump in?
Yeah, I'll just say quickly, like I read a lot, but I was probably more like a consumer of stories in all mediums when I was growing up, because it sounds like, you know, as opposed to your guys' experience, like I had like no inhibition, no like prohibitions on what I could consume. And so I was like watching a lot of TV and movies and playing a lot of video games all through my childhood. I just really loved stories, but I never really wrote, kind of like Matt was saying, like people in my family weren't readers really besides me. I didn't know anybody who wrote or like practiced any kind of art. You know, I didn't know any Filipino people that wrote until I got into college. And then, as I was mentioning earlier, kind of poetry was my entryway into writing. And then eventually from there started working on fiction.
So we have another question for the audience. What is writing a book collaboratively like, and what are new things you learned about each other in the process?
I like to joke that I have no hair because Maritza ripped it all out.
I'll let you go. It's the worst. No, it is okay. Yeah, I'm not taking pictures. You're like the kombucha girl. Okay, this is what we're gonna say. It's fun writing with your sister. Clearly, we have a rapport,
And no one can be more blunt to you than a sibling can, because there are definitely times when we're writing and we're like, "Oh, girl, that's great, yes." And then other times I'm like, "Maritza, that was terrible. You erased it, delete it, forget that you wrote that." So
vice versa.
Yes. So I like that ability for us to be able to bounce ideas off of each other. It's been lots of fun. And separately, we've each tried to write our own stories, but we never finished them. And us working together has been an accountability partner. And it's great because there are times when I just don't feel it in me to write, and Maritza's like, you have to, and vice versa. So we kind of help bring each other up and go through this crazy publishing journey together. Yeah.
Right, and I think this kind of, oh, sure. I would say like thinking about this, like, and like accountability and kind of like getting ourselves to write. So this is another question from the audience. How has COVID and the stay-at-home order impacted your writing? And this is for all of you.
Well, I've been continuing to work my other job, so it really hasn't impacted my writing schedule all that much. So I still have an insane writing schedule where I get up at 4 in the morning on weekends and write till about 10 or 11. And I still continue to do that on Saturdays and Sundays. And then I write in the evenings when I can, Monday through Friday, if I get a chance, from like 6 to 7:30. I try to. So it hasn't really impeded my writing schedule all that much.
Yeah, what about you, Randy?
In contrast to Matt, I am an early morning writer, and I keep up that habit, but I'm not always very productive these days, I think, because I'm just very stressed out. You know, things politically in the United States are not very good, to say the least. And then also things in the Philippines are not good, to say the least as well. And so I'm finding that is making it hard for me to, like, I think, be creative. And so I'll still use that time, but maybe I'll use it instead like doing research or just like brainstorming rather than like, you know, putting words on the page or in the document. But I think I've also been tried to be very intentional about just like telling myself that's okay, right? Mm-hmm. There's a lot of shit going on and like, it's okay. And I don't need to like stress about it or like feel too concerned, like that's a natural feeling or natural reaction. And yeah, and I think that it makes a big difference when you kind of give yourself that mental permission, or at least it does for me, rather than just like not writing a lot and then feeling really bad about it.
Mm-hmm. Maika or Maritza?
Yeah, so I mean, we've had a few relatives pass away because of coronavirus, and I mean, we've been grieving that and just giving ourselves time to just chill out. I know at the beginning of everyone self-isolating and getting into your bubbles, there was a lot of talk of like, oh, great, an opportunity to be productive. If you don't get out of here with like 17 projects and whatever, like you wasted your time, which is not the case. Like all we need to be doing right now is surviving, and that's okay. So we're focusing on that. And I mean, recently we've like given ourselves more of a schedule to like work on different things. Like, oh, today we're gonna do like a Dear Haiti thing, or we're gonna work on book 2 now, or book 3, so we could have the proposal or whatever. So having a schedule, a loose schedule, and not being too tied to like specific times of day to do things has really helped.
Yeah. And you mentioned revisions. So someone else has asked, what is your revision process? How many revisions are we talking when you talk about the revision process?
I'll go ahead first, I guess. So it very much like varies from project to project for me. For example, like Patron Saints of Nothing, when I was working on it, like the general shape of the story was pretty in place from the first draft, and it was a lot more like I did a lot of rewriting of the ending and kind of, you know, refining things throughout. But I went back and forth with my agent probably half a dozen times, back and forth with my editor probably another half dozen times. But then there's another project I'm working on that I have rewritten entirely 4 times, and I'm kind of getting ready to rewrite it again for a 5th time. So I'm all over the place. I think part of that's because I'm not like an outliner kind of person. I just kind of go with the flow. And I think like, if you don't put in that work ahead of time, you're going to be putting in that work later on.
Yeah, for me, revision is where like the work that I like doing takes place. I'm a terrible first drafter, kind of like Randy. I don't outline or do anything like that. I kind of like make the characters make choices, and then I just kind of follow them through. So for me, revising is where all the hard work gets done and where the story kind of finds itself for me. So I think also like Randy, I'm like 5 drafts deep in the story. And like to talk about earlier about my writing schedule, like what Randy was describing is what I consider writing, is research and just being intentional. It's not always putting words on the page. Sometimes it's just, you know, writing about a character or sitting there staring at my computer, just thinking. I'm just at the computer doing the work or thinking about it or making notes to myself. It's not always getting like a word count down. To me, I consider all that work.
Thanks, Matt. That makes me feel better.
Yeah, so it's not just me, you know, oh, today I knocked out a whole chapter. Sometimes I won't write anything down there, but I'll just be sitting there thinking about the project or what I'm working on. But it's not always getting the work done. It's just about, you know, like you said, being intentional with what you're doing. I'm not overly productive, but sometimes I'll just sit down and try to think about what I'm writing, or just writing in general, or doing research, or going over notes for a project, or trying to figure out how this thing is going to work. It's not necessarily getting, you know, the words all the way down, but I consider all that writing. To me, it's all under one big giant tent.
Amen. Yeah, so Maika and I are planters. We have to plot because, I mean, you know, we're good at like knowing what the other person's thinking, but we don't know everything. So we have to sit down and outline like what we're going to do. It ends up being pretty extensive because we get really excited about the story and just writing like, oh, and then this could happen, or like, what do you think about that? So we do a lot of that, but then we still leave enough space for the spirit to move up. So we have that, and then we start writing, and it really is just like, oh, Maika said she was really excited about this, so she writes that, and then I'll jump in there, and then she comes in after that, and then we're like constantly reading what the other person has written so we can see what's going on. And then because we also leave space for whatever to happen, we need to know before we move forward. And yeah, and then we also have like a rule of, if we have a disagreement within the story for whatever reason, we just kind of like duke it out gently by giving verbally, yes. But we just talk about like we basically just I guess state our cases, and then whoever is the most passionate is the person who wins out, because we figure that it's going to be the best thing for the story. And for revisions, yeah, like we try to get that first draft out as soon as possible. Sometimes it doesn't happen as fast as we would like, but we try to get that out ASAP. And then it ends up being more stretched out. Like we see a lot of people, they like have so many words, and then I'm like, we're just trying to get it out. To say. Yeah. So we just write the story, and then we have to go back and like flesh it out. And then for book 2, we had a lot more revisions with our editor for in this iteration, and I think it was a different. It's contemporary, but there's like a thriller aspect to it, and we're really, I guess, it was, yeah. So we'll just leave it at that. But I think that really stretched our muscles, and was a lot of heavy lifting for us. But so that was a learning process, and that showed in the revisions. Yeah.
Basically, the first draft was poo-poo, and then it just got better with time.
All right, another question someone asked what are some secret talents that you have? So I don't know. Randy, you want to start us off?
I can beatbox.
Oh, that's pretty good.
I feel like I have to do it now, but all right.
You have to do it. I'm like, unmute ourselves so we can hear you do this.
Yes, Veronica and Lillian say yes, all caps.
No, we can't do it.
My beatboxing.
Wait, did you hear? Lillian was like, oh my gosh.
Matt, what about you?
I'm a really good baker.
Oh, what?
Prove it. Bake something right now.
Yeah.
There's my kitchen. I can make really good empanadas, like pineapple empanadas. They're excellent.
Oh, I've never had a pineapple in an empanada.
Really never had piña empanadas. Are so good. And pumpkin ones too.
Oh, no, mine are ground beef, like very fatty ground beef.
I can make those too.
Yeah. All right, and what about you, Ty?
have a secret talent?
I don't know. I'm like, I don't have a secret talent. I don't know. I've had nothing.
I got scoliosis, so one of my shoulders looks higher than the other. You're welcome.
Oh, my secret talent was, I don't know if it's secret talent. We're not going to say secret talent, but basically when I started my day job, because I work in like tourism marketing, I had a wig that mimicked the real natural texture of my hair. So it's like big and, you know, flowy. And then one day I came to work and like was completely bald. But it was on Halloween that I revealed it because I dressed up as Dr. Evil. So they were like, wow, Maika, you're really like diligent and dedicated to your costume. And I'm like, no, I was always bald. My talent is I'm bald. I don't know.
That's fun. All right, another question. What are the strangest things that you have Googled for research?
Oh my God.
So my first book, the first thing I wrote, which did not get published for good reason and will never be published, was a YA zombie story. In my defense, this was like before The Walking Dead and everything, right before zombies were cool. But as part of that, I did a lot of like, what does human flesh taste like, and you know, really like dark stuff, kind of like that. That yeah, probably got me flagged.
Are there results?
Yeah, I mean, like the pretty common thing is like it tastes like chicken or like pork.
Oh my God. I'm sorry, I'm just cackling. Okay, sorry. What's the weirdest thing you've had to Google?
The weirdest thing? I guess like just different variations of how to kill people.
Yeah.
I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, every time it's an incognito, but I'm like, the FBI is totally tracking us. or TIA. I don't know which in it is. I don't know. One of them. We're being tracked.
Both of them. Let's be real.
Especially when you search these things like, in proximity to each other. So it's like, what does human flesh taste like? How do you kill people? How long does it take for a body to decompose in different humidities?
Oh my God.
I hope this is okay with your airplane day job that we're talking about.
It's okay if you don't answer, Matt.
As long as you're being intentional with these searches, it's.
Yeah, any good Google searches for you, Matt?
They're kind of on the same lines as those.
All right.
That's it.
So what would you say, what are some books that you are reading right now or really excited about reading, like kind of looking down the pipeline?
I'm really looking forward to reading Natalia Silvestre's Running. It's coming out soon. It may be out already.
On Tuesday.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, she's fantastic. I read her first two books and they're so good.
Yes, I love them both. So I'm really excited about that one.
Oh, what's her? It's on Pocket. Oh. Sorry. I'm sorry. Okay. So what am I really excited about? This is weird, but I'm excited about audiobooks in general because since quarantine and coronavirus and all of that, it's been really hard for me to sit and read for some reason, like focusing on a book and reading it has been hard. But I've been listening to a lot of romance books. But I'm also reading because I have different things that I read depending on what I'm doing. I'm reading Labyrinth Lost right now by Zoraida Cordova. I think I'm saying it right. But that book is so good. It's so good. But that's what I'm reading right now.
I just finished My Sister the Serial Killer by Oyinkan Braithwaite, and it's so good. I mean, the title tells you everything you need to know about the story, and it's really interesting. And I'm also I've like refound my love for romance novels because something else that came with all this Corona stuff is like I just stopped reading. I just didn't feel like doing anything. But I read The Worst Best Man by, I can't remember who it's by. She has glasses. She's Brazilian. I'm going to Google her name quickly. But yeah, The Worst Best Man. And when I read that, I was like, oh, this is amazing. Oh, yeah. And then it just like brought me to so many other different stories and Alyssa Cole. And yeah, I love romance.
Yeah, I'm not going to be very good at answering this question. I'm one of the judges for the National Book Award for the Young People's Literature this year. So I'm like not supposed to talk about like any children's literature. So I will say like something that wouldn't be in that category that I'm looking forward to reading is How We Get Free, which is about the Black feminism and the Combahee River Collective. It's just one of those books that I've seen pop up in a lot of like anti-racist reading lists that looks very interesting. And once I'm through the other side of the National Book Award judging, I'm eager to dig into that.
Where are you storing all the books? I think they mail you boxes and boxes of books, right?
They usually do, but this year it's all electronic because of the difficulty with shipping in-person books right now.
So someone else has asked, many writers are torn between protesting on the streets and making art. And so like, how do you see the role of art today?
So for our second book, it's called One of the Good Ones. It comes out January 5th. Our main character in that story is a teen activist, and she basically did all of her protests online. And then eventually she decides to take her activism offline and protest in real life. And then different things happen throughout the course of the story. But one thing that we have learned throughout all of this is that you can find your place in resistance. And it's whatever you feel are your best talents. Like for us right now, we're spending that quarantine period at home with our grandmother who just turned 80 yesterday. So being physically present in the protest was not, you know, an option for us because we are going to be going back home to her. But we've been able to, you know, make donations, like monetary donations, sharing about it on social media, talking to people. So it really depends on what you feel you can bring to the table. And if you're a writer, sometimes that resistance just looks like finding that moment of focus to be able to write and get out the story.
Yeah, and I would say that, I mean, art is whatever we bring out of ourselves, you know, not to get a little woo-woo, but like, I mean, for so long, the powers that be didn't want people that looked like us to write, to read, to do anything. So whatever you're doing, whatever thing, whatever work you're, whatever piece of art you're working on in whatever space, like that is a resistance in itself, I think, because just being able to be free in what you want to show to the world is, I think, worthwhile.
Yeah, Matt or Randy, anything else that you've been thinking about along the lines of this question?
Yeah, I would say that, I didn't mean to cut you off there, Randy.
Go ahead, Matt.
I would say that resistance comes in many forms, and I don't necessarily think that there's a big difference between, you know, artists and activists. Both are resisting, and I don't think there's necessarily a choice that has to be made between being, you know, an activist in the street protesting and then being an artist. One can choose to do both. One can choose to be an activist strictly. One can choose to be an artist. I mean, I've participated in rallies and have been on the streets, and then I understand writers who don't want to participate or can't or cannot do it and are focusing solely on their art. I think resistance takes many forms, and I think one person's choice to resist in their own way is their decision to make, and they're furthering the resistance in the best way they know how and how they're being their most genuine selves.
Yeah, and I would agree with all of that. You know, I'll give a quick plug here for an organization I'm part of called Malaya Movement, which is a US-based group kind of focused on defending human rights and democracy in the Philippines. But kind of connecting with an organization, I find, is very helpful, because a lot of times they can be like, hey, we just need people to, like, you know, email your Congress people or call them or whatever. So you can kind of work at that level. But of course, yeah, view my art that way too. You know, I saw a great quote going around by Tony Cade Bambara, you know, that the role of the artist is to make the revolution irresistible. And I've been thinking about that a lot. And I think that's really, really beautifully stated. Make the revolution irresistible.
Yeah, a lot of work, but sounds great. Like a great goal. All right, another fun question for all of you, and this is inspired by Randy, that karaoke scene in your book. Oh, so funny, so good. So I have to ask, what is your go-to karaoke song?
So mine is actually, if they have it, part of Your World from The Little Mermaid.
That's amazing.
Or My Shot from Hamilton, if they have it.
Yeah, okay. I would say that mine is, if I am, okay, I would say it's either You Ought to Know by Alanis Morissette, or the Bohemian Rhapsody, because it's really long and obnoxious.
I can't think of what my karaoke go-to song is. It depends on whatever mood I'm in.
It's some weird R&B song that makes everyone uncomfortable.
Oh, maybe like Tony Braxton, He Wasn't Man Enough for Me. There.
If you're Filipino, like, you gotta know the go-to, because the chances you're at like a Filipino gathering and karaoke comes up is like pretty good, so you gotta be ready.
I'm gonna be ready next time.
Matt, what about you?
Maybe some Vicente Fernandez. I don't know. I am not a karaoke person. Oh, it had to be something drunk and something Mexican for me to get up there and sing.
You're probably sad also.
Yes. hear my book, it would have to be sad.
Okay, so also I think thinking, since this book club takes place in New York, and your stories are so distinctly set in different cities, what if someone is visiting your book's town, where, you know, and post-COVID, things are still open, where are you taking them? Or where's your character taking them? Where are you guys going? That's like distinctly this place.
We're going to El Paso. It's where everything I write takes place. Everything. It's like even though I live in Arizona and I love Tucson, even though it's like COVID capital of the world right now, everything I write takes place in El Paso. It's where my center seems to be, where all my stories seem to bloom from. I'm a desert boy.
Go writing, and does it just all lead back, or it has to start there?
It just, everything I've tried to write about where I'm at now and other places, and everything seems to always zero back there.
Randy, is a similar place for you, or somewhere that?
Yeah, in the book, he ends up going to a region of the Philippines called Bicol, which is where my family is from. And so probably that region, there's actually like a really cool ATV rental trip that you can take, where you like ride these ATVs up this river to the base of Mount Mayon, this active volcano in Bicol. And so it's just like a really cool thing, because it's like you get to see, you know, as you're riding through like the natural world, but also kind of the villages and stuff that you pass along the way. And then it ends in like this really cool, you know, you're at the base of a volcano. That's cool.
Elaine would take you to Citadelle La Ferrière, which is the citadel that is in Haiti. And the reason why it was constructed is I don't know if he's the first, but the first and only king of Haiti basically was worried that after the enslaved Black people in Haiti got their freedom from the French, government, they were worried that they would come back and try to re-enslave the Haitian people. So the king of Haiti decided to build a structure that would provide refuge, and it's on one of the highest points of Haiti, so that way they can see if the enemy was coming in. And the views from up there are amazing. And when you think of the fact that this is a Black nation that fought for and gained its independence, and what they were able to accomplish as an architectural feat, it's just amazing. So Elaine would definitely take you there. Cool. It's in Haiti, by the way. I don't know if I'm too much.
Okay, so now I guess we're at 7, so we'll just go ahead and wrap up. But thank you all for coming. Thanks for these great questions from the book club and Lomas. This has been really fun. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for
having us.
Thanks for having us. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. I don't know who goes. Or
we're just going to be here for the first.
Do I just leave?
Yeah.
Zoom is so scary.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.